Hello, and welcome to Joline Knits a Lot. This is my show about knitting and crochet and other things I get up to. How are you? This is Easter weekend, and spring is being very stubborn here where I live in Edmonton. We woke up this morning to snow on the ground. Not very much, and it won't last very long, but I'm done with snow. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready for flowers and green leaves and grass, and the snow can just go. Thank you very much. It's been a very busy couple of weeks since I last saw you, since last we spoke. My younger daughter had a volleyball tournament, which actually went quite well. This is the first time for her anyway that she's really had an opportunity to play a bunch of games sort of in that way, and I think it's so good for kids to get the opportunity to play games. That's how you learn. So it was a great weekend. The girls did really well, and I was really tired at the end of it because being in a big gym with a bunch of excited 13-year-old girls is a bit much. But I was so encouraged to see that her teammates were all very supportive. No one got down on anyone. They were all really great teammates, and that to me was a big win from that weekend. I mean, they played well and they did fairly well, but to see these girls like supporting each other, that is sort of like 13 is a rough age, so I was really glad to see that. So that was 2 weeks ago. Last weekend, my older daughter had a dance competition in a city called Grand Prairie. Grand Prairie is about 450 kilometers from where we live, so it's about a 5-hour drive. She went on a bus with a bunch of the dancers, and I drove up with a good friend of mine who is also a knitter and a girl that I used to dance with many years ago. So we had a great time chatting. It was a great weekend. It's been a long time since our kids have been able to do things like go on bus trips and hang out with their friends in this way. So we were very tired when we got home, but it was a great weekend. And because I had 2 weekends of watching my kids do things that make them happy, I got to knit a lot. So I have lots of things to share with you today. But I will just give you 2 quick updates, and then we'll get into what I've been knitting. Today I'm wearing my Wool and Honey sweater. This is a pattern by Andrea Mowry. I just love it. I knit mine out of Superwash Fingering Weight by Yarn Ink, I think, and it's called Antique. It's really beautiful, pale pinks and oranges, with hints of white and black, and I really love this sweater. It's super comfy. A lot of people have knit it in non-superwash wool, which I think also would be beautiful. I just happened to pick this one, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out. It's a cozy sweater without having a lot of weight to it, and given that it's a cool day today, but still spring, I wanted something that was at least a little bit spring-like. So my Wool and Honey sweater by Andrea Mowry. The other thing, I'll just give you a very brief house update because no one needs to hear about this all the time, but we're still in our old house. I'm happy to say that it has been sold, and work is continuing apace at our new house. And so in the next, I'm hoping 3 weeks, we should be moving. So for now, we're still here, kind of just waiting. We're in limbo a little bit, but our house has been sold, and our new house, things are happening over there, and so we're in a good place right now with our homes. Oh, and one last thing I wanted to say, Teresa Young, if you are watching this, can you please email me? You won the 300 subscriber giveaway on our last episode, and I would love to be able to send the yarn out to you, so please email me at jolineknitsalot@gmail.com, or like the rest of you can email me too. Email me about anything, things you like to do, tips on how to raise an obedient corgi, like yarns that you like, patterns you found. Like, email me anything, but Teresa, I need your address. Thank you. Okay, and let's get into what I've been making. If you remember on last episode, my younger daughter had an unreasonable amount of faith in my ability to crochet. And when we were out on a shopping trip, she found this top at a great store called Simon's, and she said, "Oh, you could make me that." And I thought, it's worth a try. So given that this top is for my 13-year-old daughter, I tried to make it, she'll be layering this over top of something else, but I tried to make it a little bit more reasonable for a 13-year-old. So this is the original, and this is what I made. It's really hard to hold up. Okay, ready? No, I lied. Now, are you ready? Ta-da! I think I did pretty good. I got the yarn at Fiber Nook. They had this Estelle Eco Cotton. It's a DK weight, and I used a 4mm hook. And I not shamelessly, it's out there for everybody to consume. I found a video on YouTube. There's a lovely crafter out of Australia, I believe, who makes crocheted bathing suits. I'm assuming that she sells them, but she has videos on how you can make your own. And so I used her video as a way of figuring out how to make these daisy triangle cups. Her video was super helpful. I had to watch it. It's one of those situations where you watch it, you stop it, you try and do it, you rewind, you try and do it again. So it took me a little while to figure out, but I have to say the second one went way faster than the first. I used very little of the yellow and the white yarn, so I have lots of that one left. And I made these little triangles. And then what I did was I chained a few stitches for the back. I chained a few here, and then I picked up or crocheted into all of the stitches from the triangles across there. And then I did the same on the other side so that I had this band in the back. And then I did 2 rows of single crochet just to kind of give it a bit of stability under the bust. And then I switched to double crochet, and I just crocheted until I thought it was long enough. I wanted this to be a little bit longer in the body so it would cover more of her. And then I just chained some strings for the top halter. Currently, I think this is too long for her, so I need to fit it to her a little bit better. And then when I was sort of wrapping this around her body to see how I was doing, I realized that I had cast on or chained on too many stitches in the back. So in order to sort of snug up the back and to close it, because I was basically just crocheting back and forth, I created this sort of, I just made a really long chain, and I kind of made a bit of a corset backing. I may have to snug this up a little bit for her even more because she's quite tiny in her ribs. But I think I did pretty good. And even my daughters thought that I had done a fairly good job of making a reasonable dupe. So given the fact that I'm very, very insecure about my crochet abilities, I'm just not very good, and it's not something that I do a lot, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So I've completed a crochet top, and let me tell you, crochet goes so much faster than knitting. I know a lot of you know this, but sometimes I need to be reminded of these things. It went so fast, and it was fun. It was really nice to do something different. And now I have lots of other smaller projects that I managed to complete. It's been a very productive couple of weeks. As you know, I have been taking part in the Kitchen Sink Shop's monthly year of dishcloths knit along. This was April's. It's called The Shire. It's based on The Hobbit, and the original was knit in green, but given the fact that I have a lot of my stuff packed away right now, I just used whatever yarn I had. So this is a very cheery, springy, I think, and kind of Eastery dishcloth. And I just love knitting these dishcloths because you can have a little completed object in a day, and they're very satisfying and useful. So if I don't use them myself, somebody in my life will be getting dishcloths at the end of this year. And then, let me tell you, sitting and watching my kids do any activity can be nerve-wracking. My kid's competing in a volleyball game, my kid is dancing on stage. I know that they're nervous, and I know that I get nervous for them, and I really want them to do well. So I find that knitting totally takes the edge off. So I have been knitting a lot as they do their various activities. So with all this time to watch my kids do their activities, I managed to finish a few things. I finished these shorty socks for my older daughter. They were knit out of some posh yarn from before she was born, and she now has a driver's license. More on that in a moment. Yeah, just some little shorty socks. They're super soft. I think she'll really like them. I knit these from the top down. I put a little heel flap and gusset in and a toe, just a plain toe, nothing fancy about these socks. But yeah, okay, so back to my kid. She turned 16 in the last couple of weeks, which is another thing that happened. And a couple days after her birthday, she went to do her driver's license, because in Alberta, you can be a full-fledged driver at 16. And she passed. So now we have another driver in the house, and that's very exciting to my husband and I, because it means that's one less person we have to drive to their activities. Very exciting. Oh, and in an interesting turn of events, while I was waiting for my daughter while she was doing her driving exam, I was sitting in the registry's office, and a woman came in with a gentleman as well, and she was a Ukrainian refugee, and she was applying for Alberta Healthcare, and it just gave me such a warm feeling to know that where I live, where there is a large Ukrainian Canadian community in Western Canada, many Ukrainians emigrated here in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It's a fairly well-established community, and they have been sponsoring people from Ukraine to come here to a place where they can be safe, whether that's for a short time or a long time. We in Alberta have healthcare that is provided to us by the government. We pay for it through our taxes, but no one has to pay for healthcare. If you visit a hospital, there's no fee. You never have to pay. And so these refugees who are coming are also going to be looked after in the same way that we are, and that just makes me feel so grateful that there is a place where people can come and be looked after, and that where I live, the community that I belong to and the province where I live is offering that sense of stability and safety for people. So that's great. So socks for my daughter, one pair of socks. And then, if you recall, I had a bunch of sock tubes that I had cranked on my new 3D printed sock machine. They were just sitting around, and I thought, well, while I'm separated from my stash proper, I'll just keep these tubes around and I'll turn them into socks, because otherwise it's something I would put off and put off and put off. But if I just have them around, then I have to do something with them. And so while I was watching volleyball, I turned a pair of tubes into a pair of socks. This is mustache yarn in, I think the colorway is called Mischief Managed. It's browns and grays. I inserted a black toe and a black cuff. And then I just did a little cut in Afterthought heel, and I used that same yarn to make some sort of bullseye heels. And when I say bullseye heel, I just mean that when it's on the foot, it kind of looks like a bullseye from the back. So it's when I knit these Afterthought heels, it's essentially the same thing as knitting a toe. I do, on a man's sock, I knit about 7 rounds plain, and then I start my decreases. That's just to give a bit more depth to the heel or to the instep. So these little shorty socks are for my husband, I think, and I think he'll get them in a few minutes here once I've completed this podcast. So that's another pair of socks off the needles. And then I also turned a tube of Mondime's, Ross Tazaria's Mondim sock yarn. This is a non-superwash, I believe it's a 100% wool. It's made in Portugal, and it's a really robust sheepy yarn. It's not super soft, but it just feels like it would wear like nobody's business. And so I turned this blue tube into a pair of what I call work socks. Now, the skein of mondeem that I had a bit of a color change, but you know what? I'm willing to go with it. And I just inserted some white cuffs and toes, and then popped in the exact same heel. So it's an afterthought heel, which is essentially a toe with a few rounds knit plain before starting the decreases. And the white yarn that I'm using is West Yorkshire Spinners sock yarn in the Milk Bottle colorway, which is just another yarn that I'm trying out for heels, cuffs, and toes as an alternative. And I'm actually really liking it so far. So that is another pair of socks that I have off the needles. These might go to my brother-in-law, John. I feel like he would enjoy pair work socks because he's the kind of guy who does a lot of work outside. And that is all the things I have completed in this last couple of weeks, which I think is pretty impressive. I did one crochet top, I did one dishcloth, and 3 pairs of socks. Now, 2 of the pairs of socks are not cheating, but when you turn a tube into a sock, it takes way less time than turning a ball of yarn into a sock. So that's exciting. And that is all I have finished. But I have two things on my needles that I'd like to share with you. One of them is the With Love to Ukraine from Canada sock yarn. It's a sock yarn that was made by or dyed by Polka Creek Yarns, which is a yarn dyer out of Airdrie, Alberta. She has a little shop, which I really do need to get to. Just a plug for Polka Creek, they do self-striping yarn, obviously, because that's what I'm going to show you today, but they are also really amazing at doing like beautiful speckly yarns, and they're sort of well known for their mini bouquets. So she'll have seasonal bouquets of minis where there's like a dozen or more minis that you can buy through her shop. So go check it out. I am like, every time she comes out with a new set of minis, I'm sorely tempted. My problem is I don't know what I would do with all those minis, although I am making a crochet blanket, so I guess I could just pop them into there. I believe that Polka Creek Yarns will be at a couple of upcoming fiber festivals in Edmonton, where I live, so I need to consider that. Anyway, I am currently working on these sock yarn. This self-striping sock. It was a fundraiser for Red Cross Ukraine, and the yarn is self-striping with alternating rows of light blue and light yellow, and then darker blue and darker yellow, the colors of the Ukrainian flag. And then the red, which is the contrast color, is represents Canada and also the Red Cross. So I knit these socks because I've done quite a bit at a Ukrainian dance competition that my daughter was at last weekend. So again, it gives me a lot of joy to be able to support causes that I know are going to aid people who are right now currently suffering, but also aiding local businesses, because that's important too. So the With Love to Ukraine from Canada socks, it's a 50-gram ball of this self-striping yarn that you get, and I did a cuff and a toe in the red. And the reason that I did tubes instead of putting in a heel while I was doing it is because I was knitting in a darkened theater, and it was just easier for me to knit straight a tube than stop and fuss with yarn to do a heel. So I have completed one tube, and I'm almost done the second tube. I'm just nearly at the Kitchener end of this second sock. And on the first sock that I completed, I have already gone in and used this circular needle to figure out where I'm putting my heel. I put stitches I pick up stitches with the circular needle, and then I went in and I snipped the yarn in between and pulled it back. So now I'm ready to go ahead and insert a heel. So when I'm inserting the heel, I'm just going to start with the red. I'll knit, because this is a lady sock, I might knit maybe 5 rounds, so it's not quite as deep as the men's, and start the decreases. And so it looks like this. So we'll just start knitting here with my red. Just pick it up and knit a few rounds plain, and then essentially knit a toe, and it functions as a heel. So that is my my Ukrainian flag socks, which I was happily knitting at a Ukrainian dancing competition over the last weekend. And I have one last project on the needles, but of course I'm midway through a row, so that was poor planning on my part. I'm going to casually chat with you while I work my way to the end of this row. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm often tempted by the shells that Andrea Mowry comes out with. They're beautiful, and she often uses some really, really lovely yarns. The Inclinations shawl, which came out, maybe in the fall of last year, was one of those yarns, or one of those patterns that really tempted me. And she uses Dream State, which is a worsted weight yarn made by Spin Cycle. Spin Cycle's yarns are so unique, although I'm seeing more and more sort of in that style. What they do is they take the wool and they dye it, I believe as roving or possibly as wool, and then they spin it in their own personal little spinnery. They have a mill where they spin the yarn. And so then when this hand-dyed wool is spun into singles and then multiple plied yarns, you get this beautiful barber poling and color mixing and blending that is unique to Spin Cycle yarns or yarns of that nature. They're a lot like hand spun yarns in that respect, and the color shifts, and that shifting of color is quite unpredictable. So each project made with wool that is made in this way is unique. So I had purchased some dyed in some of their yarn, the Dream State, which is the worsted weight yarn, in a sale that they had where they were selling off seconds, which means that they had skeins that were either slightly underweight, or maybe had some knots, or maybe there were some inconsistencies. And so it was a slightly reduced price. And so I had some of this kind of yarn, seconds yarn, on hand in my stash. And then I had some points that I could use at a yarn store that would allow me to have a price reduction for a purchase that I made. And so I bought some more Dream State in some different colors, and I put them all together, and I started the Inclinations shawl this week. I'll just show you what I have done so far, and then I'll show you the skeins that I'm going to be using as the shawl progresses. Now this is an asymmetrical triangular shawl, and it's made using a half fisherman's rib. So this is the right side. I started here, as you can see, and it increases and increases and increases. And you can see that the colors are shifting and melting sort of as you go. Now this right here, I think you can see this. There's like a, maybe this way it's a little bit easier. Where did it go? There it is. So right here, there's some inconsistencies with the yarn where it's more loosely spun, and that's part of it being a second, and I'm fine with that. So the way that this triangle is constructed is you knit it and increases happen on one edge, and you knit using fisherman's rib, which is really soothing to knit. It's really quite nice. And you just keep knitting and knitting and knitting in the same way. There's the same 12 row repeat until the end, and then you bind off. It's very zen knitting. So the colors I'm currently using are, this is Melancholia, which is a sort of a deep tealy blue. But you can see even in this skein, this little bit that I have left, that the color shifts and changes. So there's right now the outside of the skein is a brighter blue, but it gets deeper as you go. The contrast color that I'm using is a color called Mississippi Marsala. And as you can see in this one, there's way more shifting happening. So there's like this more corally and browns and tans. And then as I get to the center of the ball, it's going to become more neutrals with this gray and tan coloring. So one of the fun things about knitting with this kind of yarn is watching the colors shift as you're knitting. So it's really that's part of the fun. So while it's a rather simple knitting pattern, it's the same 12 rows over and over and over again. But the color shifting and changing and how they play together is what makes it really fun. So the next colors that I'm going to be blending into, I think, this may change, is this skein, which I believe is called the Family Jewels. And I think I'm gonna try and get this kind of tealy blue to blend into this, so it'll just sort of melt into it. And then the other one I'm using is something called Rosy Maple, which I think is lovely. Again, more color shifting, and I think I'm gonna try and get this sort of neutrally tones to blend into this outside, which is sort of browns and lilacs. So I'll just have those two melt into each other. So that these are the next two that we'll be playing along. And then after that, I have the last two skeins, because this is a 6 skein project with this type of yarn, is this one, which is Rusted Rainbow, and this one, which I believe is called Wololo, W-O-L-O-L-O. Fun. So I'm going to try my best to get these things to sort of blend into each other. But if they don't, they don't. And I'm okay with that too. And that's part of the fun, is seeing how these yarns will be playing together. So that's my plan, and it is nice to have a bit of a bigger project on the needles after having been knitting sort of monogamously on socks or sock tubes for the last little while. What have you been knitting this spring? I have plans. A friend of mine is knitting the outline tee, and if you remember last summer, I got totally hooked on outline tanks, and I made 2 of them, and I love them. And so I'm going to be making myself an outline tee, because I sort of got sucked into the idea of it, and then the yarn that I used for my outline tank last year is on sale. So it turns out there are 4 skeins of that yarn on their way to me now. So there will be an outline tank in my future. All I need is the weather to warm up a little bit so I can actually wear that tee. And that's my knitting plans for the next little while. I still have lots of sock tubes lying around, so they will be, so they will be going on the needles as I finish some of these other socks. It is nice to finish a pair of socks in a couple days. I guess that's the beauty of the sock tube. Holy cow, so quick. So that's exciting, and I'm actually really enjoying finishing things quickly. And I hope that you're enjoying what you're doing too, whether that's doing some adventurous crochet or picking up some things that you haven't knit in a while, finishing some quick projects for a sense of accomplishment. It's all good. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really hoping the weather warms up for you soon. I hope it's nice where you are, and I hope you're not getting snow. Poor Manitoba. They got a ton of snow this weekend, like 60 centimeters. That's a lot of snow. So I guess I'll just take my little skiff of snow and deal with it. But I am looking forward to spring finally arriving and to see a little bit of green outside. I hope that the next couple of weeks bring you warmth, whether that's outside in the sunshine or with friends and family. And I hope that you get to do some of the things that you like to do. I know I plan on knitting a lot. I'll see you soon. Bye.